Okay, the first game we're going to look at is a game between Bobby Fischer, or Robert James Fischer, as he was given him his full name, playing against Julio Bolbochan. I'm a bit unsure on the pronunciation, so I apologise to any sort of family members of Bolbochan. Of course, Bobby Fischer was one of the most iconic players in chess history, and was also a great lover of the Najdorf. You know, and over the course of his chess career, he really sort of honed the Najdorf into a serious weapon. Perhaps in the early part of his career, he wasn't actually a great sort of exponent of the Najdorf, but later on he was a fantastic. But in this game, he's actually playing white, so he's playing with the white pieces, and he's really showing one of the classic ways in which to win against the Najdorf, which is to exploit the d5 square.
So the lesson to take away in each of these games you pick, Danny, has one particular lesson in mind, I guess, to teach the viewer, not just from the black side, because a lot of opening DVDs I find do this. They only do it from one side.
Absolutely.
But there's two people who play chess, so we're going to be looking at the main ideas from black, and this is kind of more based on the black side, but also we want to look at the main white ideas, yeah? So,
yeah, absolutely, because I think if you're going to play the Najdorf as well, you have to be aware of the dangerous strategies that white can employ.
Yeah.
And one of probably the drawbacks of the Najdorf, the way to play the classical Najdorf, is you're playing the move e5.
Do you want to point out the square on the board?
Yeah,
just which square?
So we're looking at the d5 square as a potential weakness.
With maybe right click, I think.
Right, okay.
Let's have a look. So if we go here, so basically this particular game is about that square.
Sure.
And this is the main problem when you play the Najdorf that you're going to encounter, this square.
Exactly.
And I think what we decided to do also for this DVD, just so you're wandering around bored, we're going to have it as white and black at the bottom, depending on the perspective that we want you to watch it from. So as Bobby is playing this as white,
absolutely,
we want to sort of show this from the white perspective. I think so. We're gonna show this from the white side, and when we show the black ideas, we'll show it from the black side, just to keep it from the side. So that's a square to watch out for, Danny. Do you want to take us through the opening moves? And
so I just go with this?
You can do, or you can click.
I'll just click on them.
Right. Click up there, and you can right click or click through it.
And then to actually get to the next move,
just right click, or you click on the moves with the mouse. Actually, might be easier. So
so basically, the first moves of the Najdorf, and of course we have the Najdorf on the board, and Bobby Fischer plays the move h3, which now is actually one of the main lines in the Najdorf, but at the time was a slightly less conventional way of playing. So you're basically, the idea behind h3 is white wants to play this very aggressive idea of g4, and then potentially he's controlling important squares like the f5 square. He's also going to try and kick the knight away from f6, and also it facilitates the potential development of the bishop to a very good square on square g2.
So if you right click on those squares, so if we do that, if we drag that, so g4 is the idea behind this.
Sure.
And then you've got ideas of controlling f5, a knight might come in, and then also ideas bishop coming to g2, pawn to g5. So this is an idea of Bobby's, but it's a now modern idea.
Yeah, I mean, should we come back to these games later?
Yeah, let's come back to it. Let's show the main game first.
We're going to show the main game.
Yeah.
So in this position, Bolbochan played the move knight c6.
This is a normal Najdorf move. When do you put the knight on c6, and when do you put... Because whenever I play a Najdorf, first of all, the Najdorf, as this is the first game, it's really the move a6, isn't it? So
that's right.
Just tell me, what is the point of playing a6 here? Why do you play a6 very quickly?
Well, it's a very good point. I seem to have skirted that in the
this is a Najdorf, isn't it?
It's a Najdorf. Oh, you just play a6.
You just play a6. There's not bother talking about it. But that's the Najdorf.
Basically, it's kind of like a high-class waiting move. So you're essentially saying to white, you're looking for white's next move. But of course, there's certain points behind it, because one thing you deny white the possibility of bishop b5 check, and you control the b5 square in general, so you don't later on have to worry about any annoying knight to b5 move. And you also get ready to play the move b5, which is very useful.
So let's always drag that. So if you right click, so b5 is one of the main ideas, starting a queenside counter attack,
Yeah.
And you can always left click to get rid of the
the move b5. And but I think its main sort of weapon behind this Najdorf really is its flexibility.
Very flexible opening, yeah.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
Like I say, it's a high class waiting move. You're waiting to see how black plays, how white plays, and it's always a very useful move. So I think in the older days they always used to play the Sicilian by immediately playing knight c6.
So do you want to put that arrow on that move?
Yeah.
Just drag it there, yeah. And okay.
Yeah, so they normally they used
the
to
classical Sicilian.
Exactly, they used to play because if you go back far enough, they always used to play in a very classical way in chess.
Yeah.
When you went e4, they went e5, and only later on these slightly more modern ideas appeared. For example, the fianchetto of the bishops.
Yeah.
So black going g6 and bishop e7.
Okay.
But to go back to the game, white played the move h3.
Yeah.
And then black responded with a move knight c6. Now, in modern theory, generally speaking, black either responds to the move h3 with a classical Najdorf move, which is the move e5.
So when you play the Najdorf, okay, the move e5 there.
Sure.
Would you say this is one of the main themes that black?
This is a classical way of playing a Najdorf. With this pawn structure, with the pawn on d6 and e5. And as we see in the game, the only slight drawback to that way of playing is the fact that eventually you've got this hold on d5, which white can exploit.
So highlight that square again. So why is that hold? Very quickly, just that's an
outpost. Because exactly, it's a potential outpost for the white pieces, which cannot be controlled by a black pawn. Because the c pawn has been exchanged and the black pawn is on e5, so it can't be controlled by a pawn.
So the pros of playing this move e5 are it's an aggressive move. So black plays this move e5.
Yeah.
And it gains some space in the centre.
Absolutely.
So
Can you stop taking over my video? I'm constantly.
I've got to be the stooge. I've got to get to the point.
I don't like the idea.
There's going to be fights in about half an hour coming on. Fisticuffs, get ready.
Pulled, yeah.
But the downsides of this move, Danny, is it gives control of the square next to it. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's the classical way of playing the Najdorf, Simon.
Okay. Cool.
And the other way to play, which is probably the main other way of playing, is the move e6.
So to keep this simple for people at home,
sure.
I mean, we're spending a bit more time on this first game because we're just going over the basic ideas.
Absolutely.
When do you play e6 and when do you play e5?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on your style. I mean, in this particular variation, I tend to probably slightly prefer the move e6. But it all depends. I mean, there's some players, for example, like Maxime Bachelard-Grave, who seems to play e5 almost all the time. And in the Danny King book, with a Najdorf, he seemed to recommend e5 in pretty much every game. But I think it depends. I mean, you could be flexible, and that's one of the great benefits of the Najdorf. One of the great strengths of the Najdorf is that you can be as flexible as possible.
So is e6 a more flexible move, and e5 is more forcing in general?
I think e6. Yeah. I think e5. So e5 is the more classical way of playing an Najdorf because you have this classical structure with a pawn on e5 and a pawn on d6, and you generally speaking, you're going to try and get a setup like this. You're going to put the bishop on e6. You're going to put the knight on d7, you're going to put the bishop on e7. This is a classical way of playing the Najdorf. And having the rook on c8. Putting the rook to c8. So if we just throw in some random moves, for example, like, I don't know, bishop e2, knight bd7, castles.
Why'd you put the knight on d7?
Well, I think it's a more flexible square.
Let's just highlight that. Sorry, mate. So, that's one thing I've always wondered. Can you put the knight here or the knight here on c6?
That's absolutely right.
So, when does the knight maybe go to d7 rather than to c6? Is there any general rule for the viewer at home?
Well, I think I generally prefer it on d7, Simon, because on d7, I think in this particular setup with the bishop on e6, it's slightly better placed. Because, for example, if white was to put a knight on d5 in any kind of position...
And this is the square we're worried
Yeah,
about.
exactly. Yeah. So if white was to...
Ever put that,
put the knight on d5, then having that knight on d7 is very harmonious with black's setup.
Because it supports the other knight?
Because it supports the other... Exactly, you're fighting for central squares. So I think once you play the move e5, you're really committed to fighting for these central squares, particularly the square d5. If black can win the struggle for control over d5, then he's...
So would you say, with a knight on d7, that knight, it basically it's easier to come and control d5 than if it was on c6. So it can come and control that square more. So d7...
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you're going to go e5, you generally want to put your knight on d7. Is that a rule?
And also think black is going for some sort of perfect kind of play, some perfect kind of setup. He's got the rook on c8, which put a tremendous amount of pressure on the white queen side. He's also maybe going for the move b5 at some point.
So draw those arrows. Left click to get rid of them, to get rid of any arrows on there, and let's just see them. Shall we? Just right click.
So the rook, the rook to c8, and basically, at some point play the move b5. And put the bishop on e7. I mean, sometimes he actually delays castling because the black king is not in any great danger. Now, when he plays the move e6, for example, if we just go back to that one. Let's just go back to the position before. So if black was to go e6, then it slightly changes because then, we're generally going to play with the move b5 and then put the bishop on b7.
So show those with the arrows, please, mate.
So b5, put the bishop on b7, and put the knight to d7 again. Now again, there's a lot of situations where you can play with a knight on c6. It all depends on how. A lot of it comes down to style. Sometimes you want to play with a knight on c6 because you want to pressurise a knight on d4. And you put in, so you play with a knight to c6 instead of d7. But I generally prefer to play with a knight to d7.
Okay, so let's see what happened in the game then. So knight c6 was played, and this is maybe not the modern way of playing. And Bobby continued with his plan. Or
g4 is a very natural move now. So of course you're getting ready to play this move to g4. On to g5. Now, I believe black played really a mistake. I don't like his next move. He took on d4.
Okay.
Which I think is a mistake.
So white takes back, and explain why you think that's a mistake then.
Well, I think the point is you're kind of giving up the fight for the centre too easily. I mean, once you take on d4 and the white queen is replaced on d4, then, how do you chase that white queen away from the centre? Because once he goes e5...
Which he played in the game.
The queen is coming back to d3. And he's still got, his queen. It's not a terrible move, knight takes d4, but it just seems to me the way Bolbochan played in this game is not a way a modern player would play.
Okay, because it's simplifying too easily. You're not fighting as black, and when you play an idol, if we want to fight for the initiative, you don't want to make too many exchanges unless you've got a real point. And just quickly, why did the queen go to d3 rather than another square? Is it to protect e4 more?
Well, I think to be honest with you, again, we're fighting for the control of this. Rather than putting the queen on e3.
Right.
It's white has to. Part of the reason why white has to fight for this d5 square is because there's many situations, and hopefully we'll look at that later in the video, where black can play the very free move d5.
D5, right.
Which is a very important move.
Show that move in the arrows. So if black can ever move that pawn to d5, that's a really good move to play.
Absolutely.
It gets rid of the weak pawn and gets rid of that weak square. So that's a move black should be looking out for. If you can play it. Okay. So let's go on with the game. So
it's an interesting game.
Sure.
So black simply developed.
And
again, Bobby plays very aggressive way. He's chasing the knight away from the centre. He plays a move g5.
Okay. And the other advantage is that knight is quite a good knight because now when it moves, it loses control over which square. So
again, it loses control over this d5 square.
Right, it has to move away from it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So now the knight ends up on c5, but I believe the knight is better. The knight would prefer to be on f6 rather than c5. I don't think the knight on c5 in a knight off is really.
Okay, let's see that knight get there.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a look at the game.
Yeah.
Okay. The one sort of advantage of black's play is that white's had to lose a little bit of time with the queen. But the problem is now we clearly see that this d5 square is a problem for black.
Because it can't be controlled by many black pieces.
No, exactly.
Okay.
The only piece that can control that square is the bishop. So Fischer in the game employs a very clever strategy. He tries to exchange off this bishop. So
which bishop?
This bishop on c8, which eventually comes to e6, and controls the d5 square. Right. But once white exchanges off that bishop, then there's no piece that can. So the knight eventually ends up on d5, and that knight cannot be moved.
So show that knight coming into d5 and arrows. So okay, and right. So generally a good strategy for white. And let's just see a couple more moves. I mean, bishop e6, bishop e6 played. This is the only bishop can control the weak square.
Sure.
Generally, when you have this pawn structure where black's gone e5, positionally, if white can swap off the light square bishops, so if white can get rid of this one for this one, that's a good idea, because then he's got total domination of this square here.
Absolutely.
And this square here can only be defended by that bishop. So this is a good sort of thing to do. And if we go a little bit forwards, so castles. You want to take us through White's plan of doing that?
Yeah, White plays f3.
Yeah.
Because again, if you're going to eventually move the knight to d5, you have to be wary that this e4. So White reinforces his pawn on e4.
Yeah.
And now he's free to potentially play. He could now play knight d5 if he wanted to, because Black would then have to give up the advantage of the
bishops.
Two bishops. But he found, as I said, he finds an even more ambitious plan of exchanging off this bishop, as we'll see in the game.
So let's see that. It's a nice idea. So Black's sort of struggling for play here. He hasn't got really much of an attack,
Absolutely,
has he?
no.
I mean, how do you attack as Black here? You can't really at the moment.
This is a position I would want to avoid as Black, because let's imagine that he plays a move which is a typical counter-attacking move, and that's the move b5. So if he plays b5, he's not really got any serious threats. You know, if White just plonks a knight in on d5, for example, what's your actual threat? You've got no real threat.
Yeah.
And we'd probably go h4 first, and then if you go b4, we'll go knight d5.
Yeah.
We'll say, well, actually, what's your threat?
And another plan you're demonstrating here for White, which we'll look at in another game. I mean, Black's b4 plan here is a common idea, but White's pawn storm, which we'll look at later on anyway, because it's very
Absolutely,
common.
The pawn storm is so common, and in this position, for example, if Black was to take on d5, you take back, you've really got a bit of a nightmare position, because White's got the two bishops.
Domination of the centre.
Absolutely, domination. Black has got no active play.
Yeah.
He's got no chances of an attack.
No.
I mean, it takes him so many moves to create a threat. I mean, he could play, for example, he could play queen c7, and then potentially knight a4. But if White was to go bishop h3, you're not even going to have the time to play that, because I'm just going to take your rook off.
Yeah.
So you'd have to move the rook, and then White would just get on with the attack.
h5, g6.
It's like a dream position for White. It's absolutely a dream position. So to some extent, Black's strategy has failed, because this knight has come away from f6 and he's lost the fight for the control of the d5 square. His strategy has already failed. Okay.
So in the game, let's see what Bobby did then, and so after knight d7.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think that probably Black's best chance was to play with like f5.
Is f5? I've seen a lot of Nibel's players play this move. Move f5 in these structures when you play e5.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This move, I mean, it's something I've seen. Is this a really common idea in this kind of structure in the middle game?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think you're trying. There is certain drawbacks, obviously, to playing f5 because you're slightly weakening your king.
Yeah.
But I think in a position like this, Black is kind of obliged to play it.
Forced to do something.
Yeah, because in the game, White's play was too straightforward. You know, as we said before, to some extent, Black's already lost a strategic battle.
Yeah.
So when you've lost a strategic battle, I think what you should do is try and mix the game up.
Right, sure.
And try and make the game.
So f5 is an interesting break, because you're playing moves in front of your king, but it's something you can do to try to complicate it in this kind of structure.
Absolutely.
So opposite side castling, think about playing f5 in these types of structures.
Because also, if Black now takes on e4 in any position, he then makes his pawn isolated. So White doesn't have the easy ride that he had in the game.
Yeah.
He would have to think about, constantly think about this e4 pawn.
Okay.
And if he was to take, for example, en passant, we can take out a rook, and at least we've got some counterplay.
On the f-file.
Exactly. And we got some, we got some chances. So I think f5 was Black's best try.
Yeah.
But in the game, he played the rather passive knight d7, so he's kind of fiddling around with his knight, not really doing anything.
Yeah.
He's wasted so much time with his knight, he's gone back to d7, c5, and then he's come back to d7 again.
Wasting a lot of time. So now Bobby goes for this exchange light square bishop, so let's have a look. So h4.
h4, yep.
b5 played.
b5.
And now just bishop h3. And bishop h3 is trying to get domination of the d5 square.
Absolutely.
So after bishop h3...
Although, to be honest with you, I don't even think White needed to play this move. I mean, his position is so good.
Okay.
I think he could just get on straight. I think now modern players would actually play the move H5.
Just attack. Just get on with it. Yeah, White. Checkmate's the end of the game. Why bother about this positional rubbish, eh?
Absolute rubbish, mate.
Rubbish. Too slow. Get on with it, boys.
But Bobby would have been concerned about the move Knight B6.
Trying to control D5, yeah? Yeah.
But actually in the game, White played Bishop H3.
Yeah.
And I think this is where Black had made a serious strategic error, after which he was already completely lost.
Yeah.
You know, in a higher sense.
Yeah.
Especially when he played against a player of Bobby Fischer's ability. The move he should have played was Knight B6. Because I don't know why, but for some reason, I don't think White is necessarily threatening to take on E6.
Because why wouldn't White show taking on E6? Why wouldn't White want to do that, maybe?
Well, because even though you've got this ugly-looking pawn structure, it's actually quite useful. It controls a lot of squares.
So what square in particular is that?
So it controls, very important, most importantly of all, Simon, it controls that D5
So
square.
highlight that square. This is what this game's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
It
now
controls
that
D5
helps.
square.
Yeah, okay. And the Black Knight, one thing I found in the Sicilian, not just the Najdorf, but other Sicilians, I'm going to go lower because, I feel more like a... No, it doesn't go any lower. I'm so big nowadays.
Yeah. What was it you said earlier? I said you're like bigger than me. You said bigger than me in every way.
Every single way.
Yeah, like
Don't ask. We compared earlier, and I am taller. But one thing I've noticed a lot of these Sicilians when I play with Black, very, very key idea, and this is another thing. We're going to look at this from the Black point of view, but this goes for a lot of Sicilians. This square here, this is a key square, C4. And often, when the knight is on D7, this knight coming into C4 is a great way to get counterplay, isn't it? That Black knight going this route, D7, B6, C4, and here, this is a very strong idea as well. Yeah.
So I actually think that White probably shouldn't take.
Yeah.
Because now, if he goes B3, obviously, which he'd like to play to stop the knight coming into C4.
Yeah.
So I just highlight that square. Then we have rook takes F3.
Just winning a pawn,
So actually, it's very strange. But I think, again, it probably shows how strategy then was a little bit primitive.
Yeah.
So Black really plays quite a bad positional error of taking, which is really playing into White's hands.
Yeah.
Taking this bishop.
Yeah.
Rook takes. And now he plays the move Knight B6.
Oh, and this is a good question for everyone here. I mean, I think any title player should be able to see what White plays here. I mean, this is like a dream position.
Oh.
I mean, you've got to stop that knight coming into C4. I mean, whip it off. Go on. Do the whipping sound. I know you've got more practice at that than me. Let's hear it. Come on, let's hear it.
No, let's not go into that now.
Okay. So you get rid of that.
It's like that Prodigy song, was it?
Smack my something up.
Right,
okay. Let's move on quickly.
Actually, I had a night like that the other night. Yeah, it's a bit like that from the video. Anyway, let's not go there.
Thanks for telling me that.
Right, okay.
Down in Godalming, where we're filming. Okay.
I've already disgraced myself. So White, now of course the absolute beautiful square that we were talking about earlier, and White goes knight d5. So if we already see that White has a huge strategic advantage, in fact a winning strategic advantage, I would say, because after the move Queen d8, if we really appraise the position, we see that knight on d5 is completely controlling the game.
This knight is just an absolute, and you can never move that knight now, can you? That knight can never be moved because there's no pawn can attack it, no piece can swap it. Yeah. So this is the Najdorf player's worst nightmare.
Absolutely.
So as it's quite funny this because as an eternal pessimist, well, I don't know, you're not really, but I like the way you're doing a video on the Najdorf and you start with the worst ever possible situation that Black can get in. Rather than so.
I think that's just coincidence, Simon.
Just coincidence.
No, I think it's basically because it was like the earliest game I put in, and it was like 1960 odd.
Okay.
So that's
that's
the real reason, rather than I'm an eternal pessimist.
No, I'm only joking. You're not really.
Are you trying to be Freud on me or something? Right.
I won't go there. I know about the Oedipus theory, and we don't want to discuss that in this video.
But I mean, we clearly see that White has won a strategic battle because the only way that Black can remove that knight is to sacrifice the exchange.
Yeah, and Black's bishop's horrible as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really contribute. So let's just see how the game.
Let's go quickly now, I think, shall we?
Yeah.
Because we've seen the main ideas.
Absolutely.
Let's just see how Bobby finished it off, yeah?
So, Queen F5, very nice tactical move, because of course if you take, then rather than just taking back, which would also be very strong, I'll win a whole piece.
Yeah.
So when you have good position, you tend to, good tactics tend to happen.
Yep.
So, again, another very nice move, Rook A3, switching the attack, playing on all sides of the board.
Yeah, this is horrible now.
This is just...
I mean, the Rook now coming into the 7th rank at some point. And, well, okay, I mean, keeping the Queens on is fine, swapping was okay. And the Knight just dominates, doesn't it? It completely dominates.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's see.
I think White should keep the Queens on, because it potentially has an attack, which is what happened in the game. So, yeah, Black has played Queen H8. It's like the most horrible position ever.
Yeah.
So not only can White use the D5 square for the Knight, but he could also use it for the Rook.
Yeah.
And now he just played A3 just to show that Black was completely helpless. Because the problem is, Simon, if he plays a move F6, we've got an absolute killer move here.
Yep.
Well, I don't know
Queen
if you
B3.
Yeah, Queen B3, absolute killer move.
They don't call me a GM for nothing.
And then Rook F7,
Rook
and
D6,
I take on D6. Yeah.
Well, I've still got the magic. Hard tactic, that one. Or you could even go Rook takes D6 first, but I'm just showing off there.
You are a genius, sire.
Well, I know, mate. Someone's got to be. So, okay, so the game is over. Let's see it, because the rest of this is not really relevant for our start.
White has won the strategic battle.
Yeah, and he finished very nicely.
And here Black should have gone King H8, but he was still technically lost.
But basically Black's pattern, as we've seen.
Yeah.
So...
Right, okay. Yeah, clearly you won't be writing a biography of Julio Bolbochan then. Right.
Will anyone?
No.
So,
he was actually quite a good player back in the day.
Yeah, he looks it, yeah.
So, of course, Black resigned now because it's forced checkmate after Queen's year. Sorry, hang on, is this right?
Yes, Danny. Check it and check on...
Yeah, do I go here, do I?
I don't give a point, actually.
I think I go here, don't I? And then you go here.
It's your DVD, mate.
Oh, no, I've got Queen C8.
Queen C8, yeah, okay.
Shows how clearly heavily we've researched these games.
Yeah.
So, have I got time to show some other examples in that particular?
I think we will do, but let's do that in the next video, because I mean, I just want to round up this video very quickly. That, to me, well, you can put the moves on the board, but to me, the critical points are after Black takes on D4. And first of all, this Knight C6. So let's just go through those moves very quickly.
Knight C6 is not common these days.
So Knight C6 is probably not a very good idea against H3, and then giving away the tension by taking on D4.
Sure.
It just seems to help. It doesn't help Black at all. It helps
I
White.
think he just gives White an easier ride in this game. You want to, you want to set your opponent problems, not just give them headaches.
And then also, if we go on, like sorry to do this, but like G5, as you say, it's all about D5. This square here, this is something Black's got to avoid.
Absolutely.
And then I'm going to whiz through later on. And the key mistake, Danny, was after Bishop H3 from Bobby. Bishop H3. Black now plays a horrible positional idea. He's got to keep the bishop here, but he swaps off, loses control of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no way that, say, if you had a Carlson or a Caruana today, or an Anand, they would never take.
And now this is
to be fair, a lot of the players from the past wouldn't have played that move either. You know, like a Petrosian would not have taken.
No, it's a horrible move.
So it's bad strategical move.
Because this position here is just a nightmare, isn't it?
It's just...
And a nightmare's appropriate. Do you like what I did there? Do you know nightmare? They call me...
It's too early, mate. It's too early for those sort of...
They call me the Ricky Gervais of the chess world.
What, you mean completely unfunny? Yeah.
And fat.
I know, I was going to say, and overweight,
yeah. Sorry, Ricky.
No, but I think it's a very instructive game. You know, if you're like a beginner to the nine, or if you never... When I saw this game in 60 best... You know, Fischer was a genius. A lot of his ideas are very simple. They were simple, but they were easy to understand. I
read a quote yesterday, and it was something along the lines like, "The chess player who makes things look simple is actually the more genius player." You know why? You know, because they make they make it look so easy, yet it's not. They just understand how to do it. But anyway, I think we will have a look at these other demonstrations. Do they demonstrate the same idea? We'll do them very snappy,
demonstrate.
Like bang, bang. But let's just round off this video now. And we'll move on to other demonstrations of D5 again, mate?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's do that now.